So today, the BPS Special Department just wanted to present a little bit on the extended school year. I know that this is going to be, there's a lot of questions that are going to be coming up, so we wanted to make this short and give you the information, and then we'll answer those questions for you. So this year, ESY will still be a 5-week, 5-day summer program for students with disabilities who they have ESY in their IEPs, as their teams have identified that they have a high risk of substantial regression over the summer. ESY this year will operate Monday, July 6th, 2020 to Friday, August 7th, 2020. And the hours this year will be 9 to 12. Due to the COVID-19 restrictions in place now, instruction for 2020 will be completely remote, as we have been doing the last few months. We're planning for it to be remote for right now. The instruction for ESY will consist of every day, every student will have 3 synchronous hours for all grade levels, meaning that they're going to be with a teacher for 3 hours a day. Early childhood, we're working on curriculum with the early childhood team in BPS and adapting it and modifying it for students with disabilities. So that's for students K0 to K2 grade level. Grades 1 to 8 will be focusing on reading, math. Coding is one of the examples that was given, but an hour of enrichment. So coding is one of those examples. There's also virtual field trips and other pieces or experiences students can do online. And then they'll also be addressing social emotional learning online as well, as part of those 3 hours. Our high school students will be working in conjunction with the Summer Learning Academy, which is what we're putting into place in BPS in the district for high school students, in order to gain access to math, reading, any other pieces of extra learning that they might be needing to do, as well as the transition and strive teams are working to put together experiences for our students at the high school level that are going to be working on transition skills, some of the soft learning skills, independent living skills, and we're also utilizing a lot of our partnerships over the summer during the same time, being partnerships like Impactability, Best Buddies, and continuing some of the work we do during the school year into the summer for high school students. ABA services will be, and the programming will be provided using the ACE instruction and virtual learning supports. If you have ABA in your IEPs, your goals are written with the ACE, the Autism Curriculum Encyclopedia. We're going to continue that same work that's been happening over the school year remotely. Will be continued into the summer using with the BCBA and ABA specialist staff. Related services will also be provided as it is during the school year. It'll be provided during the instructional hours between 9 and 12 based on the IEP. So if your child has a related service like speech, that will be scheduled into those 3 hours or the time that they have it. And also Wilson tutoring or Wilson or rules-based reading programming will be provided based on what's in the IEP. Families will access materials the same way we have been now, which is via Zoom, the Google Classroom, Clever, and also when needed, hard copies of learning materials will be mailed to homes. What we need to know right now, what you need to know now is that we're going to be sending out RSVP requests like we have in the past very shortly. Between tomorrow, Friday, and Monday, you should be receiving a robocall. What will happen in that phone call is just simply going to ask you if you plan on having your child attend ESY or not. It'll be yes or no, and that's the only thing you need to answer. That just helps us plan better for how many classrooms we have to have open for the students. We'll also be emailing.
Cindie, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
yeah.
When you say that how many classrooms you're going to open, you mean remotely, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, remotely.
I want to make sure that parents have the appropriate expectation that there is no plan currently at the local or state level to open ESY in person. Although that might change. Right now, that's not the situation. So I think I just think it's fair to let parents know if they're opting in, what's being offered is remote learning and not in-person services.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Definitely, yes. This is responding if you're going to have your child attending to online remote learning opportunities in the summer. That's what we'll be asking. Thank you, Carolyn, for the clarification. We'll be measuring student progress, same as we have in the prior years, which is usually a pre and post assessment of the summer, and we'll mail those home to you. And then we'll also be monitoring student attendance as we do every summer. We take attendance to see who's attending. Again, this RSVP, if you have ESY in your IEP, the RSVP will be saying whether or not you're going to be having your child attend online remote learning ESY for this year. And with that, we have.
This is Carolyn again. Sorry to keep interrupting.
No, not at all.
Is there a possibility that because we don't know what DESE's plans are, and maybe it doesn't matter for BPS, but is there a way to include in the survey whether or not parents want in-person services? Because I do know that like some day schools, right, and some residential schools have remained open, but also the fact that like with regard to ABA services that parents might be getting through their private or public insurance, that those have been telehealth, right? And so I think the issue is that whether or not there's a choice, it would be good to know, just for planning purposes, is if a choice were offered, would you opt in for in-person services? Because I think that a lot of parents don't want in-person services, even if they were available, and that there's other parents that are very desperate for in-person services and sort of just getting a gauge, you know, about what the percentage is for parents that want something. And I'm not saying it's going to be available or that that's an option, but I think it would be helpful to know, like, is it 10% of our population? Is it 25% of our population? Like, I think it would be a good question to ask just for data collecting purposes.
Yeah, we can definitely take that under, that's a good suggestion. We'll definitely look into figuring out how to get that information for polling purposes. Because right now, just want to make it very clear, right now we are following what's been provided as
and it's
guided.
Totally a poll, right? It's totally
Yeah.
a poll, but I know that discussions are actually happening above both of our respective levels, and I apologize for Bonnie in the background with Mary, but I think it would just be good to know, like, how many families are looking for this and how many families, even if it were available, they wouldn't opt in because they're just concerned about the coronavirus in general. I think it would just be a good data point to have to share with others at the state level, you know?
Yep, definitely writing all that down. Thank you. And we're actually at the end of what this was we just want to give you a snapshot of information so you had it. So we're at the question portion. I can stop sharing the screen, and please, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or jump in and ask or raise your hand, and we can definitely answer the questions you might have. All right, sorry, go ahead. Just looking in the chat, there's a question that there should be a call coming Friday or Monday. Yes, about ESY. That is the call becoming either Friday or Monday. Also, what I was going to say too, I just want to make sure is an email will also be sent out as well. So you might get it in 2 different places, as long as you answer one of the options. If you answer either via email or on the phone, the answer we'll have record of it. So you'll be getting it via phone and email. And another question in the chat, will there be an option to only have services such as Wilson reading and or related services as in prior years with live ESY? Yes, there is the option to have just related services or just Wilson reading. This year it will be online, but really you can just get services only. You won't be needing to be part of the 3-hour program. Is ESY not available to every student, especially the 10,000 students that haven't logged in during the past few months? No, from Fabian. Fabian, if you want to, could you clarify more?
Yeah, there's a lot of students that hasn't been logged in or hasn't have a chance to just get the classes that haven't been offering to them. Are we going to be able to offer ESY to those students?
So right now, and this would be changing, again, this is actually something that's still, it's about 80% check, but we're, to Carolyn's point, looking for more information from families. Right now, there's about 3,700 students that have ESY in their IEP. The first round of RSVPs we're putting out to see who's going to be interested in the online learning. And then we're still discussing what it would mean to extend it out to students that do not have ESY in their IEPs. There's also other opportunities through summer learning that's going to be occurring as well. That might be something that students might be interested in, that might have an IEP as well, but not ESY, that they might be interested in partaking in.
So
So
Cindy, just clarification, right? So for kids being sent, or families being sent that poll, there's kids that go to out-of-district day programs and kids that go to out-of-district residential programs. Some have remained open, some have closed. Is the survey also going to make sure that it reaches out to individuals that are in those day programs or out-of-district residential programs because they may not have any other options at this point?
So we have 4 coordinators that work with out-of-district students, and we are monitoring closely what they're doing. Most of the day programs have stayed, their remote learning that's what they're doing. So that's what we've been getting reports on. If there are programs, some of the out-of-district programs do not have summer programs, and we're looking for alternatives for them, like we do every year. There's some of the schools that don't have summer programming. We usually work with Compass to provide that service, those services in the summer. They're doing the same thing.
So for the ones that go to the out-of-district programs, I guess what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're also provide those individuals with ESY, which they typically would have been responsible for had there not been a pandemic.
Yes.
So they're still responsible.
Yes, they're carrying through, yes, remote learning for right now. The day programs are, yes. So the Wilson tutors will be certified Wilson tutors. We have Wilson trained and certified. We do try to make sure that we have as many certified as possible, but we do sometimes have people that have been trained but doing it a long time, many years, providing tutoring services for a long time. The ESY, yeah.
Can you kind of give, because I know you mentioned about 9 to 12, this is when ESY is going to be taking place. Can you kind of give us like a scenario of how the class is going to be forming, and if 4th grade kids are going to be together, how many students going to be in the classroom, and what is the entails of the classrooms going to be? Just like briefly, so at least parents can understand what they're looking for, what they're going to look into.
So the groupings will be the same size as state max, and also following the guidelines that Boston goes by. So most of the classrooms don't exceed 10. Some do go to 12 at times. A student will sign in at 9 o'clock. It's very different across the system right now how different schools are doing it, but for ESY, everyone will be signing at 9 o'clock. There'll probably be some sort of warm up and or circle depending on the grade level of getting everyone kind of up and going. Usually about 45 minutes of that time we'll be doing ELA or math, doing a core subject like that in skills wise. There'll be a break that's worked in, probably involving some sort of movement. So kids they're not sitting for the whole entire time. On the next hour, they probably will start the opposite. If it's not ELA, it's math, they'll start the opposite core subject skill that they'll do skills on for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. Another break that's together. Like, it's not a break to get up and go away from the computer, but a break where you're sitting and the student isn't sitting the whole time. And then the last hour, we're pushing a lot of enrichment and utilizing a lot of online learning tools that might be, like I said, a museum. I think there's a lot of virtual museum tours kids can go on, as well as something like coding, which is obviously done on the computer, but learning how to do things like that will be on the computer. So that's what a typical day would look like, and it would run from 9 to 12, and at 12 o'clock, everything's done. So again, everyone will be going on the same time. For ESY, it won't be different, like it might vary for schools right now. It'll be 9 to 12. There is another question in the chat about the start date. The start date is July 6th, 2020, and it's running till August 7th, 2020. When is this start? What is the ESY email address for questions? I'm gonna have Zach post that for me in the chat. Do you have it?
I threw it in the chat, Cindie. It's in the chat, the email and the
Oh,
phone
great. Thanks,
number
Roxy. Yes.
earlier.
Thank
Other
you.
question was, you usually share the slides, but someone also wanted to verify if they could get a PowerPoint. So,
Mhm.
as long as we'll post it on the SpEdPAC website, so you guys will also have that. And then did you address the question about if the Wilson tutors are certified Wilson tutors? Yeah.
I did. It did say with you, do we do it first for certified? And if we don't have enough people, they might be trained. Wilson trained people.
And then the person asked who is in charge of ESY this year.
So the Portia Paulding, who's also on here, is the person that oversees ESY specifically, and manages all the different logistical operations parts. Zachary Houston does a lot of work with the ABA programming for the summer. I think people know, but I'll just make sure we're all on the same page. I am transitioning on getting things up and running, and I think Ethan Davenport Burns is on the call as well. So one, I want to introduce him if he is here, if he just wants to pop in. Ethan Davenport Burns will be taking over for my role in Boston Public Schools. I thought I saw him earlier. He might have had to jump off. I'm not sure, but oh no, he's here.
I am here. Sorry about that, Cindie.
Thanks.
Are you the big E that we're all seeing?
I'm the big E, and I look forward to working with you all and meeting with you soon, and excited to come to your next meeting, and look forward to introducing myself in a more proper way.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, Ethan and I have been working very closely on the transition. So like I said, we're starting on getting the ESY up and running, and the pieces are there, and Ethan will be the person when you, he was in charge of is a tough question.
Just want to thank Cindie. Want to thank Cindie for her time as we have transitioned, and as she's helped prepare me. She's given me lots of downloads already, and we have a bunch more to go. So I look forward to learning more. And I also just want to thank Carolyn. I know she's transitioning as well, and thank her for tireless energy over the years for to SpEdPAC and to special education kids across the city.
Thank you, Ethan. I would just want to add to that before we end our call tonight. I think it would be appropriate and appreciated if we all expressed our sincere appreciation to Cindie. Been at the helm of special education in BPS for the last 5 years and has worked tirelessly on behalf of all of our children, despite repeated challenges in administration and getting things done. She's always kept the interests of our children at the forefront and has advocated ferociously on behalf of our children in a way that few people have done in this past. And I'm really sad that she's moving on, although I'm happy for her that that's something that she wants. But I do think that her efforts and her dedication and her commitment to our students has been unparalleled in my entire 10-year tenure as Boston SpEdPAC chair. And we owe her a debt of gratitude. And I just hope that other people will join me in thanking her for all that she has done for us. So thank you, Cindie.
Thank you, Cindie. I appreciate that, Caroline. So I think, Cindy's been working really hard and always help and support the families in needs, not just for special ed, but also families who she's encountered. So I really appreciate that and wish you all the best. This is just the beginning. She's still in the school system, but I'm sure that she'll be able to just see some of her kids going to her school, being the headmaster there. So wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I'm very excited I get to stay in BPS. I'm sad to be leaving this work, but I will be at McKinley, so all day will be special ed still there. So I'm pretty excited about that, and really been honored to serve you all for the last 5 years. So thank you.
Thank you. We do have some other questions in the chat. Some important ones. Mary Jane's question too about students who can't tolerate any virtual services. What is BPS going to do to meet those needs?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, being able to tolerate the online services has been a challenge for a lot of our families. I know that we've been getting a lot of feedback on that, which is really difficult, I think, in general. And one of the biggest concerns we've had since the closure was going to be online services for our students with disabilities, especially the highest need. So we're definitely aware that that's a challenge. We continue to figure out different ways to access students. If it's on the phone, maybe even it might not be feeling like it's a classroom, but even if there's connection on phone, I think that schools are trying their best to make sure we continue to connect with students. When we're able to be back in person, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to very much, we know that this is happening, and we know there's going to be a loss. So we'll know that we are also forward planning for when we are back, able to do services more traditionally in a way that students are able to receive easier and better. So when that planning occurs is when we need to come back and see what's happened, what's been lost in learning, and then how do we make the plans to regain that lost learning as well as moving forward. Again, I want to express I know how challenging it is to do this online for a lot of kids, especially with disabilities. And I want to make sure that, we are aware, and we're trying to find different ways to be as innovative as possible, but also realize that there is something about being in person that does make a difference in the ability to get the services in a way that is meaningful.
And Lena's question basically is, if something happens where they do change it and there's an option for a person, is there a possibility of a person who's was being able to opt for in-person service for ESY?
Yep. So know that to Carolyn's point, I think the understanding of how many people would take advantage of the in-person services if they were put in place is good information to have and data to have as we move forward. Know that while we are putting forth the remote planning, because that is what the suggestion is right now between the governor as well as where we are in our process, we are planning for a reopening and many different types of reopening. So we're constantly
currently, Cindie, sorry to cut you off, but no, Roxy, there is no current plan to do in-person services for ESY. The state is continuing to look at that issue. They have a whole reopening board that's looking at this issue, but there's been no guidance or directive to any school district, including Boston so far, to do any type of in-person services. Now, whether or not that will change remains to be seen. I certainly appreciate on a personal and professional level the need for that. But currently, there's so many things having to do with PPE and masks and temperature taking and the need for transportation that is very complicated. And those, sorry for Mary Kane yelling in the background, but so we're looking at all of those things, and I want to assure people that we recognize the need that families are feeling, particularly of our most needy students, but there's been no specific guidance or direction on that yet, but that doesn't mean it won't be forthcoming, which is why I was asking sort of like when they had the discussion a few weeks ago or even this week, I don't even know, the days are all running together. Sort of, if it were to become available, how many parents would actually want that? Because, I have a child with significant disabilities. Other people have a child with significant disabilities. I may want in-person services, or I may say, you know what, it's too much of a risk for us. We're not interested in doing that, because what we know is that a large percentage of our population of kids with special needs are also medically fragile. Right? So our so-called 0.4 kids, of which I think there's around 2,500 of them, they also bring with them a host of medical issues. And so parents might say, even if you were to offer ESY in person, I'm not interested. And I do think it's helpful to poll families to say, if you had a choice, what is it that you would be interested in doing? Because I think that choice is an important thing for families, right? And knowing whether or not there is a choice, which there isn't yet, don't get me wrong. But if there were to be a choice, what would you want? Because that will also dictate what the planning needs to involve for how many kids. So I think we just have to take it one step at a time. I mean, I think one of the complicating issues in BPS is that obviously we have a much higher volume of kids with significant disabilities. And the majority of those children also require transportation in order to get to and home from any programming that may be offered. And so it's one thing to say you can social distance in a school and open more classrooms, and there's not general ed students there, so you might be able to do it. But when you throw in the mix the piece about transportation, that complicates it so much more, because you have to basically do one kid every other row, right? And so it's very complicated. So, but I will say that people are definitely focused on this. People are definitely looking on that. And that's why I asked about the issue of the survey. If we're going to ask people about who's interested in ESY, let's also ask them, if ESY were to be available in person, are you interested? Because some families are going to say yes, and some families are going to say no. And that can help dictate what the ultimate decision is by knowing what the volume of the need is, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for that explanation. Just try to move through some of the other questions. And Brittany, we may need to clarify if this question is regarding a child that was accepted into BPS in K0.
Roxy, I think you froze.
Yeah.
Did we lose her? Is the parent who asked that question on and wants to speak?
Hi, yes. Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, my student transferred to BPS, and the day he was supposed to start school actually ended up being the day that they closed school for the year. And I haven't had any access or emails to remote classrooms. So I'm just wondering how these guidelines would apply to my son in this case, because it's like he doesn't have ESY on his IEP, but he also hasn't been in a classroom since February.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks. Yeah, so this definitely applies to your child. It sounds like it just seems like a bad, like this the wrong timing for everything to start and then have everything close. If you don't mind, I'm gonna chat you privately. If you could just let me know your child's name so we can follow up with you tomorrow to get you up and running with services, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
Of course.
I'll private chat you so you can send me your child's name.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I apologize, my Wi-Fi glitch, but so I lost the chat for the questions. So if someone, Sandy, can you grab those questions?
Yeah, Brittany just asked the question that you started, so she got her answer, and Cindy's gonna touch base with her.
I think the next question was related to the grouping. Is the grouping going to be more precise with ability levels because it's remote? Will it allow them to group better?
So Cindy, I guess what I was wondering is, are there any opportunities with the remote learning? Like, are there better things that you can do that you couldn't do in person that you're kind of excited about?
Yeah, I think we're definitely still exploring a lot of the different pieces that are the silver linings for remote learning, which to your point about more precise grouping, in addition to what has been great about this year so far and the interest on the side of the BPS staff is that a lot of people want to try to stay on with their students during the summer through this online platform because of the continuity of what they've been able to establish in the time that the school's been closed now. So that's one example. Another example, like you said, more precise grouping. So we're not having to worry about what school students are at necessarily when we can bring them all into one room. So definitely taking advantage of those options and those options of what's become available. So yes, definitely looking for the things that are working that do work better in the virtual world than they do when we're in person, that we might have some constraints by when we're in buildings.
Quick question, Cindy. I know you mentioned base of the email and the phone call that's going to be sending out tomorrow or Monday, and how many parents who's going to be able to accept to do the by the virtual ESY for the 5 weeks that's going to take place. The other parents that still having struggles and haven't had any of services during the time, if they contact the district or contact, who do they need to contact to say, I really want my child to have ESY, but I'm not too sure if she doesn't have an IEP, but how do I be able to move forward to that so I can be able to have some remote learning during the summer? How will that be able to just
I
go
think
forward?
that would use, if you use the ESY email address, so we have it all in one place. I think to the point of Carolyn earlier about polling, if people are interested in something, it'd be helpful to know what it is so we can figure out how to then organize for it. If we're going to be organizing for it or not, that's something that we can only kind of start to plan for if we know about it. So if you use the ESY email address, please send an email along that says what you're interested in, and then we can go from there.
Okay. No, I'll be able to share with the families because I think that's something, at least to something to start for now, because there's a lot of students they lost. They don't know what to do.
I think it's important, Carolyn, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's important for parents to communicate with us, right, with SpEdPAC and with special education, what their child has been able to do, what their child hasn't been able to do, because a lot of children who may not have an official IEP are also struggling during this time. And I think that hearing from parents and knowing what they're going through is incredibly important. So I would ask parents to share this story with us, whether it's through the SpEdPAC email, if they're online now, sharing that in the chat. I would like to try to collect some of that information so that we can inform the decision makers what's going on with families. You know, I hear things anecdotally, but it would be really helpful to hear from parents directly about what's working, what's not working, and what their needs are. Because in order to meet their needs, we need to know what they are, right? And what I would say is that for my child, remote learning is not working at all, right? Despite the teacher's best efforts and despite therapist's best efforts, I mean, I have a nonverbal child who has an intellectual disability, and this remote learning situation is just not working. And to hear from the number of parents that are going through the same thing, I mean, one voice is one, but many voice is much stronger. So we want to hear those stories, and we want to know specifically what it is that they're asking for and what they need. And I think a survey is a good way to do that, to say, is your child receiving remote learning? Yeah, is it beneficial to them in any way, right? What are the difficulties that you're dealing with remote learning? I mean, I can't even get my child to attend to a screen. And that's just my situation, but I'm only one parent. And we have over, I think, 2,000 students in BPS that are coded as 0.4, which means most significantly impacted. And we need to hear from those families because the personal stories invoke policy changes, right? And so I know the struggle is real. I know it's very complicated to do these things about reopening, but I don't want our children to be the population that's forgotten in this, right? But hearing from parents directly is really the most beneficial and strongest motivation to invoke policy change. So
If I could, go ahead, Elsie.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt if someone else, but I did want to echo what I was so glad Carolyn said what she did. And I guess my question is, or questions I'm hearing from other parents are, you know, I also have an extraordinarily medically fragile, very young little boy. And because the task force, you know, with the governor, the state reopening task force has been so specific about what will be opportunities, including for young kids in these different phases. One of the things I think that's very confusing for parents when they try to translate that into SPED language is that if you look at phases right about now, or, you know, soon to be phase 2 is when preventative care and services are starting to be allowed to be offered through other venues, through hospitals, through day programs, officially in this second phase. And so it begs the question for those of us, again, who have had absolutely zero success, you know, with remote learning, where you know, that's technically falls in HHS and Health and Human Services, but people are saying, well, if, you know, if my student can access PT or OT or a service they would otherwise get through BPS, they can now access through a hospital. It begs how involved we are in those discussions with task force, how we rate ourselves with phases, I think is really vital. And for what it's worth, you know, we just spent, you know, and everyone's incredible efforts here, but half of our Zoom call we spent having such difficulty, which is certainly no one's fault, but I think the irony is really worth kind of noting. We're not, you know, we a lot of the kids need to be not behind them. That was apparently a comment, but I guess my question is, do people have any expectation that whether they reject or accept whatever the plan is for summer, that it's frighteningly going to be any indicator of what they will face in the fall? I know the grand answer is we don't know, but it's important to remember that's a constant anxiety, you know.
I would, if I could piggyback on both what Kelsey and Carolyn said, we had an IEP meeting today for one of my 3 kids on IEPs. And the middle one, he's at Boston Latin Academy, and he's straight F at this point. And our takeaway from it is that he needs the physical scaffolding of a school and a classroom and a teacher to focus his attention. And we've started talking about, well, maybe part of the IEP needs to be, if they're not in school physically next fall, how do we defer his senior year? Because he cannot be a remote student for his senior year. I mean, you know, he's getting ticklers from Fordham and Vanderbilt and Brown, and that was before COVID. After COVID, bye, forget it. So I think part of this discussion about how do we deal with ESY for medically fragile and for kids who can't handle remote learning, I think that we as SpEdPAC might need to consider that going forward. How do we handle this in the coming school year if this remote model just doesn't work for a significant portion of our students?
I don't know, Cindy, if you're probably trying to elaborate on that. Just like few other people talking about, there's some kids who's having really hard time with the remote learning, whether focusing issues, you know, ADHD cannot stay still. How are you going to be able to measure to see, okay, those kids are making progress? I mean, we're not returning any students, you know, back, but learning, they're not really gaining much. I think the frustration, the anxiety that they're getting from that, it just adding more to it. So how will we be able to just figure out how to measure that? Because yes, I have my child, you know, some days we have better days than the others. Some days I cannot even have her to just sitting down for minutes to just listening, and she's like, I can't. But I mean, it's hard for them, you know, just not being around in the school building, the teachers, and be able to do it. But younger kids, they have their own way, even though we have breaks, but it's still really hard time. And I'm worried about the whole learning. They're not really learning. And then the materials that given them is like an reading process. It's not really new things that they are learning per se. And if they do they really retain it? I'm really concerned about that as well.
Are you ready? All right. What's turkey sandwich? Hi, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So,
Go ahead, Kim.
hi. the ESY is 3 hours, so 2 hours are gonna be with the teacher and then maybe an hour with a museum visit or something? Is that how it's going?
Yeah. Sorry, the third hour, the teacher's still there. It's just something that's more enrichment or more, it's different than skills, but still the teacher's there.
Yeah, like a video based, like they go on a virtual field trip or something like that. So 2 hours in person. So the second part of my question is it because Erin's been doing 1-to-1? It's worked out well for her. Is this going to be with the class with a lot of kids, or is it 1-to-1? I'm sorry that my video cut out before. You might have answered this question, but so is it 1-to-1, or is it with how many kids in a class for what do you call it, grade school?
I think that's a great question to clarify. So this is a program we're providing, or we're coming up with an offering in an ESY model. I do want to make sure that I want to highlight a couple things. One, the feedback you're giving today is very helpful for me to be able to take to different places that I go to and different meetings I'm at to hear what's actually happening for students. Because I think, there's a lot of, your voice is very important, because a lot of the feedback here, there's a lot of assumptions made about certain populations of students and what they might be able to access. But I think hearing what the lived experience is what's really important, and understanding what this is looking like and how the short-term and long-term impacts are going to affect our kids. To the ESY specific point, and just like now for services, we are just the same way that during the school year that you should be getting services provided to you right now that you might not be able to take part in all of them, or you might be giving feedback that it's not working in the group. That's what we need to have individual conversations about as well. So this is the programming for ESY. We're not taking the I out of the IEP. It's still individualized. So you need to talk with your coach, talk with your school, talk with us. As many different people talk about what is in the IEP that's working and what's not. And we want to work around what is working as much as possible to make sure that continues. So we're not trying to stop or take away anything. Again, I also want to highlight that this year there's a lot more interest from teachers to stay on with their students for continuity, so that in a very perfect world, what we're trying to plan for is that when it starts on July 6th, it's a continuation of what's already been happening right now. So there's not that much on-ramping for your child to learn, to learn a new person or to learn a new system, but that they're just kind of taking a break and then continuing on in the summer. So I hope that helps.
Just clarification, the 1-to-ones, someone just asked, are the 1-to-ones going to continue during ESY?
So people that have a child with a 1-to-1 should have received an email asking a little earlier than tomorrow and Monday when the phone calls will come out. There was an email that went out to students with 1-to-1s to see if they were going to be participating remotely continuing to the summer. So if you didn't get that, please let us know. Because if your child is attending and you would like the 1-to-1 to continue with them in the summer, we will be providing that service.
Yeah, not everybody received that, so I haven't received a phone call yet.
About the 1-to-1?
Yes.
Okay. Can you email me and let me know? Okay. And also, if you didn't receive the email for the 1-to-1, please email. This is a 1-to-1 para. Please email the ESY at bostonpublicschools.org if you have a 1-to-1 para for your child, and let us know if you're going to plan on attending or not, please.
Is that also if they have like for instance, if they have Wilson for 1-to-1, will that be able to apply as well?
So Wilson's different, and that's what we were talking about earlier. We'll definitely be figuring out how to do those services for Wilson, but that's not the same as the 1-to-1 para. Right. So we'll be contacting people about Wilson, or it's rules-based reading is what it is, rules-based reading services, and we'll need to figure out with what people are normally getting in the school year versus the summer, if it's going to be in person or in group. That's a conversation we'll have to have about the services. The 1-to-1 I was referring to in the chat question that happened to pop up that I saw was a 1-to-1 para is what I'm assuming. So that's where the emails come in. Okay.
Right, that was my question about the 1-to-1 para. My son also gets 1-to-1 speech and OT and PT during ESY as part of his IEP. I mean, are all of those he can't do group settings at all. Like this is totally failing him. Well, are those also still going to be offered one-to-one if it's on his IEP that's what he gets?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yep. Yes. And building off that question too, I think it was asked earlier, I just want to make sure people know.
Sorry, but people need to understand what's being offered is remote learning. So it's speech therapy one-to-one. It's, you know, there's a big difference for our kiddos between having someone there. Like I participated in speech therapy with my own daughter who communicates through, you know, an iPad. And it's an issue of my prompting her and my taking her to the next step and my prompting her to like indicate what she's communicating. It's not the same as a specialized service being provided to your child. And it's no fault of the teachers or the therapists. It's the world that we're living in right now. So if it's not meaningful and it's not something that's, you know, beneficial to your child, just because they're offering it doesn't mean you shouldn't be saying, when my child does go back to school, whenever that may be, right? Whether it's through ESY or the next school year, you need to be considering making a claim for compensatory services, because there's so many of our children, from the very young ones in kindergarten, you know, or pre-kindergarten to up until my daughter's 20 years old, that just can't, no matter what we do, they can't benefit from, participate in remote learning. So you need to look at what's reasonable to make a claim for additional services. And this is no reflection on Cindie, the school department, or any other school district throughout the state of Massachusetts. It's an issue of reality, right? Which is, if your child is supposed to be getting specific services and they can't provide them in a meaningful way during this pandemic, then you need to be considering making a claim for compensatory services. And that's, you know, this is probably not my SpEdPAC hat, not my state hat. This is my lawyer mom hat, which is saying that if your child's not benefiting from these services, which is the case for a lot of our kiddos, then you need to be creating a log of what you received versus what you would have received, and whether or not it was possible for them to participate in a meaningful way. And I encourage all families to do that and to share that information with SpEdPAC, because again, it's not the fault of any administrators, it's not the fault of any teachers, it's not the fault of any therapists. It's the world that we're living in, which is completely unprecedented, you know, in the last 100 years. So let's figure it out. But this whole pandemic is nobody's fault. But the people that it's the least fault of is our children. So let's create a record and let's figure out what's reasonable on the go forward, because our children are only entitled to special education services from the time that they're 3 up until the age of 22. And if they've missed out on 3, 6, 9 months of any actual services, then that's a legitimate claim. And I'm not saying that it's going to be found in your favor, but if you don't document things, then it's not going to help you with your claim, right? And it's not to say that, you know, they're going to jam them all in the first year that we're back, because I don't know about you guys, but I have like 7 different therapists that work with my kid, and it's not going to work for it. It's a matter of figuring it out, but it's also just being realistic about the world that we're living in, right? Which is, you can offer my kid remote learning, but if she can't respond to you and she doesn't know what she's doing, she's not maintaining or gaining any skills. We're just where we are, right? And it's nobody's fault. So I would just encourage parents that are on this Zoom and parents that you know of to just document what's going on with you. And it's all going to be figured out at a later date. But the fact is that, I'm sorry, this is my own personal thing, but the least people that are responsible for what's going on around us are our children with special needs. So create a record and we go from there.
Carolyn, so compensatory services is great, but I think for us, for at least Rowan and Griffin's case, Phoebe's doing great remotely. But Rowan and Griffin, it's not a matter of them not receiving services. It's that they cannot be educated, period. There's no FAPE at all. Like, no possible combination of services can be provided to educate my sons at this point. It's just, it cannot be done unless they're sending people
And
in
that's
a
the
protective
reality,
gear to my
Jack, right?
house to
But that's
educate
just
them.
the reality. I mean, I have
No,
a
I realize
nonverbal-
that. I realize that. But fundamentally, I think we're looking at a much bigger issue. It's not restricted to services being provided. It's whether they can be educated at all.
Right.
They
I mean,
can't.
and
So
Jack,
what am I supposed to, I'm supposed to
I've
ask
heard
for 11th grade again? I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, you have to decide whether or not that's something that's appropriate for your child or not, right? So, I mean, I think it's an issue of, is remote learning meaningful for your child? If it's not possible for remote learning to be meaningful for your child, do you want to make a claim for compensatory services, or do you want them to move on because they're not willing to do compensatory services, or they're not going to be meaningful for your child? But for other parents who, like, you know, have children that, and quite honestly, it's not going to be possible to jam it all in the first year that we're back, right? It's an issue of what's reasonable, what's appropriate. It's not that we can say that teachers and therapists haven't made a best effort. It's not their fault either, right? It's an issue of what's going to work for your child and your family and your child's aspirations for whatever they think is going to go on. I mean, we're in a situation that hasn't existed for 100 years, right? So it's just asking parents to be reasonable. But I certainly think it's prudent for each and every parent to keep a log of what's going on for their child, and then for them to decide, as life starts to resume at some level of normalcy, and then ultimately, hopefully, 100% of normalcy, what works. You know, I would never say that my child owed every single hour for that she's missed out on, but I would never, ever state with any clarity that this remote learning process has been meaningful for my child in any way, shape, or form, despite the best efforts of teachers and our therapists. And I think parents need to know that it's okay to feel that way, right? We're not blaming teachers, we're not blaming therapists. We're just in a set of circumstances that nobody could have predicted in our lifetime. So then you say, well, what's reasonable on the go forward? Your kid might want to stay back. Your kid might say, hell no, I'm not staying back, I'm moving forward. But then he's ill prepared for it. So then you look at, well, what other services can we bootstrap with that to make it better for him? Is it through Mass Rehab Commission? Is it through DDS? Is it through Mass Health? I don't know what he's eligible for, right? They're all different. But it's an issue of saying, the reality is our kids are the most impacted during this period of time. And what I want to do is collect the stories from families to know how severely their families being impacted, to share those stories so that we can make policy decisions on the go forward that take that into consideration. That's all.
Last but not least, thank you to all the past 2019-20 SpEdPAC board, especially Carolyn, for your extraordinary 11 years of service. Appreciate it greatly.
Hey everybody, thank you for your patience. It's Lisa Connor. I apologize. My work computer took a Dixie, and then I couldn't get on through my home computer, but I ended up being able to come in towards the end. So my deepest apologies for that. You've got a board, you got the ESY, so I'm looking forward to working with everyone next year.
Thank you.
Have a great summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You, everyone. I'm sorry, that was still getting a little excessive. But we're all done unless someone else has something. We have the information in the chat. We will be in touch with the board. Please feel free to email us any concerns, questions, or anything like that. We are available there, and this will be posted on the YouTube channel. In addition, the notes, once Cindie gives us her PowerPoint, it will also be posted under general meetings there.
I just want to quickly say something in that I've been on this board for the last year, and it's been a fantastic experience and really helpful. And I've really enjoyed getting to know all the other board members and the group. And I'm very excited about the new people. And I think we're going to have a great year next year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Zach, thank you for that technical support too. We appreciate you and see you too.
Yes, thank you, Zach.
Glad I could be here.
Good night, all.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.